Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right in today because we're exploring a genuinely powerful theme, rebuilding with vision. We're going to extract this brilliant, time-tested blueprint for godly modern leadership, all based on the life of Nehemiah. Honestly, whether you're leading a family, a business, a ministry, or just your local community, this explainer is absolutely going to shift the way you view your responsibilities. I want to start by throwing this quote out there. Every generation needs leaders who will do more than manage what exists. It needs leaders who will rebuild what has fallen. Think about that for a second. Our world is so full of broken systems, fractured relationships, and compromised values. A broken world desperately needs builders, not just managers. It needs people who are actually willing to do the heavy lifting of restoration. Our source material for this deep dive is the incredibly insightful Nehemiah Leadership Series, Volume 2, by Reverend Felix Tete Ayatuta. And what's really fascinating about this specific volume is that it goes way beyond how a leader simply starts a project. A lot of leaders start with a ton of courage, but they kind of fizzle out later, right? This text explores the deeper, hidden disciplines required for a leader to not just start well, but to actually finish well. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the 5-part architectural schematic we'll be using today. First, the burden to rebuild. Second, the foundation, spiritual depth. Third, the framework, ethical strength. Fourth, strategy, vision, and resilience. And finally, number 5, leaving a lasting legacy. Section 1. The burden to rebuild. From cupbearer to master builder. So when we first meet Nehemiah, he's not a politician, he's not some master engineer, he is just a humble cupbearer to a foreign king. But he carried this massive, undeniable burden to restore his ruined city. And that's the thing, rebuilding always starts with a burden like that. Godly leadership is entirely character-driven, not title-driven. The only reason Nehemiah was eventually able to rebuild a massive physical wall was because he had first spent years quietly building his own character on a firm, unshakable foundation. Section 2. The foundation, spiritual depth in leadership. In any architectural structure, the visible work above ground is literally only as strong as the hidden foundation below it. For a leader, the absolute bedrock of that foundation is dependence. That means relying fully on God's strength and wisdom rather than on human ability. When Nehemiah heard about the broken walls of Jerusalem, before he lifted a single stone, actually before he even drafted a blueprint, he lifted his heart to God in worship. He didn't just rush out and try to fix things in his own power. Which brings us to this profound realization from the text. Leadership begins before the first decision is made. It begins on your knees. Let's bring this into your own modern context for a second. Where are you currently relying on your own abilities, your own networking skills, or your own intellect, instead of making daily prayerful dependence on God your very first habit? Section 3. The framework. Ethical strength in leadership. This ethical framework we're talking about, it's basically the structural steel that dictates how you behave when the crowds are cheering you on, and, much more importantly, when absolutely no one is watching. A core pillar of that framework is humility, choosing service over self-promotion. Now, this isn't some single dramatic gesture for the cameras. It's a long, quiet refusal of privilege for the sake of serving others. It's choosing to serve when you could legally and culturally demand to be served. I really want you to think about this number right here, 12. For 12 full years, Nehemiah had the absolute legal right to claim a governor's food allowance. It was standard practice. But he refused it for those 12 years because the burden on the common people was already just too heavy. He absorbed the cost himself. That is staggering ethical strength. You see, compromised leadership avoids the truth just to maintain comfort and popularity. But godly leadership, it pursues honesty and concrete healing. When Nehemiah found out the wealthy nobles were actively exploiting the poor, he didn't try to smooth it over or sweep it under the rug. He confronted them publicly and demanded concrete restitution. We're talking fields and vineyards returned that very day, not just empty apologies. He repaired the broken systems. Section 4. Strategy, vision, and resilience, the outer work of building. So godly leadership is deeply rooted in prayer and ethics, yes, for sure. But it doesn't stop there. It requires highly organized action, brilliant vision casting, and just the raw grit to see a project through. Just look at Nehemiah's strategic patience on this timeline. He carried the burden for months in a foreign land. He arrived in Jerusalem, and instead of immediately giving this fiery, impassioned speech, he waited 3 full days. He surveyed the damaged walls totally privately, in secret, by night, counting the cost. Only after gathering all the facts and forming a solid plan did he cast the vision publicly. His practical methodology is honestly a masterclass in organizing resources. He surveyed privately, planned clearly, cast the vision, and then organized the work defensively. When fierce opposition arose, he deliberately placed families together on the wall. It was a brilliant strategy, ensuring they were naturally motivated to protect one another. They literally guarded the wall with a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other. And pulling this off required immense resilience, which is bouncing back in strength after setbacks and opposition. Nehemiah faced brutal mockery, political traps, and literal death threats from enemies like Sanballat and Tobiah. But he outright refused to let fear have the final say. Instead of panicking, he simply prayed for God to strengthen his hands, and he got right back to work. 52. Against all odds, pushing through intense political opposition, death threats, and crazy resource shortages, the entire wall around the city of Jerusalem was miraculously completed in just 52 days. That's unbelievable. Even their worst enemies had to step back and admit that this level of progress proved God was fighting for them. Section 5. Leaving a lasting legacy beyond the wall. True leaders understand that the project itself isn't the ultimate goal. They build a lasting spiritual heritage that spans generations. Notice this really humble prayer that gets repeated over and over at the end of Nehemiah's memoir. Remember me, my God, for good. After all his brilliant success, he didn't demand a parade. He didn't build a statue of himself. He measured his success purely by God's reward and recognition, completely untethered from human applause. Which brings us to the author's ultimate revelation. The highest purpose of a godly leader is revelation, pointing others to Christ. Nehemiah was a brilliant leader, no doubt, but he was just a signpost. Every faithful leader's ultimate job is to point the people they lead to Jesus, the ultimate, perfect leader who never fails. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Are you building a legacy of fame or a legacy of faithfulness? Whether you're rebuilding a team, a family, or an entire community, take Nehemiah's blueprint. Depend on God, lead with ethical strength, plan strategically, and let your ultimate goal be pointing others to the perfect leader.